Hi, John. Yeah, while we're waiting for others to join, maybe just to flag up a few upcoming events. So next Wednesday, John Leary will be resuming his field methods group, which will also be focusing on the cooking diaries and looking at local adaptations of the cooking diaries. So that'll be next Wednesday. And I'll send invites around to everyone as well. I think John will have sent it to the field studies group already. And then the Wednesday after that, we will have webinar 4 of the ECO series, which will be on data analysis. Okay, I think we'll give it 1 minute more and then begin. Okay, let's begin. Thank you everybody for joining today for webinar 3 of the ECO webinar series. So this webinar series is designed to highlight the Cooking Diaries methodology, the MECS Cooking Diaries methodology, which can deliver the data that we are looking for from the ECO projects. The ECO projects are, the ECO Challenge Fund is a series of 13 pilot studies and 1 market assessment, which is looking at whether or to what extent the efficient electric cooking appliances can fit the cultural cooking processes and the electricity supply of a given market. And so the Cooking Diaries methodology can deliver that data for us. So previous webinars, the first webinar, we had an introduction to the Cooking Diaries methodology. 2 weeks ago, John Leary explained how to set up a Cooking Diaries methodology. And today we're looking at the actual data collection. And so this webinar, the talk will be provided by Anna, who I will now hand over to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Anna. I work for GAMOS in the MECS program and I am the Tanzania link researcher. I'm very happy to be here with you today for this webinar and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks Anna. So as with the previous webinars, if everybody could keep their mic and video off just to help with the bandwidth so there's no delays. Just to let you know that the recordings will be made available afterwards. I think with the previous webinar there were some issues accessing that, so we'll make it available both on the Eco shared folder and the field methods shared folder, but do let me know if you have any trouble accessing it. And during the webinar, please feel free to, if you have any questions, to add them to the chat box. We'll try to answer the questions as we go along, and there'll also be time at the end to ask questions as well. Okay, thanks very much. And yeah, just a reminder again that this is being recorded.
Hi everyone, I'm Anna, MECS Tanzania link researcher working for GAMOS. I've implemented a 6-month cooking diary study on an EPC trial in northern Tanzania, partnering with Access to Energy Institute, NextLeaf and PowerGen. So I'll be drawing on that experience in this webinar about data collection. In this webinar, we will cover the different types of cooking diary, the 4 phases of data collection, recording energy and cooking processes data during the diaries, how to introduce the electric cookers to participants and how this introduction fits into the diaries process, data verification, which is a really important step to get good quality data, exit surveys conducted at the end of the study, and a couple of optional activities that can enhance understanding of electric device use and also their appropriateness, and also might help to disseminate these findings. There are 2 types of cooking diary that we have developed and used successfully in previous research projects. The first is the intensive cooking diary. Every heating event that occurs, regardless of what appliance is used, is recorded in fine detail. This includes the times of dishes and the start and end time of cooking, what was cooked and who was cooked for. It also has detailed cooking process data, what utensils were used, if a lid was used, or if food was reheated, for example. The light version of the cooking diary is much simpler. The key difference is that it only records usage of the electric appliance that the study is interested in, not all the stoves a household has. The purpose is just to monitor usage of the electric cooking appliance or appliances if the study has multiple. It covers time of use, the menu item cooked, the number of people cooked for, and stops there in terms of detail. As we go through this webinar, I'll explain how these 2 types can be used in the same study at different times and why that might be useful. We recommend 4 phases of data collection, as illustrated here. The timings here are examples of what we recommend for a study of approximately 6 months in duration. Firstly, we have the baseline, which is an intensive cooking diary that goes on for at least 3 weeks. After the baseline, there is a short interval in the data gathering to introduce the electric appliances, train the cooks in how to use them, and give them some time to get used to them. The second phase we call transition. This is when electric cookers have been introduced and an intensive cooking diary is used to monitor how they fit into cooking practices. Phase 3 data collection is a light version of the cooking diary, but this happens over a longer period. It's used to see how usage of the electric cookers changes over that time and to gather more targeted cooking data just about the use of the electric cookers. And finally, phase 4 is an Endline cooking diary, also intensive, to understand how the electric cookers have become part of standard cooking practices and activities. So now I'll run through each of these in a bit more detail. Phase 1 is the baseline. The baseline phase is really important to understand existing cultural cooking processes and their energy requirements. Without a good baseline, we can't know if electric cooking fits into existing cooking practices or how it changes or influences them. This is one of the key eco research questions. Does the use of efficient electrical cooking appliances fit the cultural processes of cooking and the electricity supply for a given market? The baseline is a standard intensive cooking diary, gathering really detailed information about what is cooked, what appliances are used, fuel use, cooking processes, and who is cooking and being cooked for. We recommend doing a baseline that is at least 3 weeks long, because in our experience, it can take a little time for cooks and enumerators to start producing good quality data. There are bound to be issues at the beginning that need ironing out. So to ensure at least 2 weeks of good quality data is collected, we recommend a baseline that runs for 3 weeks, as this allows the first few days to have problems without compromising the rest of the study. During the baseline, the participants cook as normal, recording energy and time measurements on their notebook. Enumerators visit each day and interview the cooks, loading the data from the notebook and the cook's memory onto the COBO Toolbox app. It's really important that the enumerators visit once a day, because otherwise cooks will start to forget the details. For example, how many people they cooked for, or what utensils they used. Of course, the cooks could write all of this down, but when they are busy cooking, that can be annoying and a distraction. So this way, they just remember until the enumerator visits, and then they tell the enumerator those details. However, cooks really must be trained to write down time and energy measurements. It's much less likely they would remember detailed energy measurements with any kind of accuracy. Before going on to other phases in the study, we'll briefly review the data that cooks are collecting and how they go about doing that. One of the major roles that cooks need to be trained in and comfortable with is taking the energy measurements that tell us how much energy it takes them to cook. For charcoal, firewood, kerosene and LPG, key equipment for this is the digital hanging scales and the flat scales on the right. For charcoal or wood, this means weighing a bag of fuel before and after the meal. In the bag, they should put more fuel than they think they will need, weigh it and write down that weight. Then they take out the fuel they need and use it, weighing the bag again at the end of the meal. For kerosene, the whole stove can be weighed before and after the meal is cooked. And for LPG, it's a little bit harder to get accurate measurements, and we found that, short of having a gas flow meter, the flat scales is best. The LPG cylinder in use should be of a size that the cook can lift it on and off the scale at the beginning and end of each meal. So for the fuels, kerosene, charcoal, firewood and LPG, the cook must take fuel weights before and after the end of each meal. However, for electricity, we take readings before and after each dish. The cook will use a plug-in meter and zero it at the start of each dish, writing down the kilowatt-hour reading at the end of the dish. Or they might have a continuous data logger and be reading the kilowatt-hour readings from this. The second type of data that cooks are gathering is that about cooking processes. It's detailed data about what is cooked and how they go about it. The way this happens is that enumerators visit the cooks and interview them, going through the COBO and asking the cooks the last 3 meals, perhaps dinner, breakfast and lunch if the enumerator visits in the afternoon, and maybe an additional snack or a couple of water heating events. The data captured in this COBO form is listed on this slide. A common question is, how can participants remember all of these details? This is why it's so important that enumerators go every day. Sitting here now, it's quite easy for us to think back to last night and think what we cooked or how many people there were that were eating it. But 2 or 3 days ago, when we think back, it gets much harder to recall. The cook is likely to remember how they cooked and who for when thinking back over the previous 24 hours. If the cook is struggling to remember those details, there's no reason why they shouldn't make more notes on their notepad rather than just the numbers, the energy and the time measurements. They can write down as much as they like. The aim of the notepad is just to make the process as easy as possible for the cooks, and the frequent enumerator visits mean that they don't necessarily have to write down things that they can easily remember. The cooks are the ones that really have to interrupt their normal routines with this data collection exercise, so we want to make it as easy as possible for them. Now a word on data verification and how the enumerators and lead researcher are involved in this. Enumerators monitor and make sure participants are recording data correctly during the study. They might notice that someone is using the hanging balance incorrectly, for example, and be able to train them again to get accurate readings. Meanwhile, the lead researcher is checking the data as it comes in, making sure it is good quality and catching any anomalous data as it arrives. This is why COBO Toolbox is such a useful tool. The daily upload means it's much easier to check data while the study is ongoing and make the necessary changes to improve it and correct any issues. Perhaps one household seems to always record absurdly high charcoal weights. The enumerator might catch this themselves, but if they don't, it will be visible in the data the lead researcher sees. The enumerator can be alerted and the issue troubleshooted by them during the next visit by providing more training to the cook to ensure accurate readings. The lead researcher can inspect the data manually on the COBO website or download it periodically as an Excel spreadsheet and apply some simple checks. For example, they can check that the times recorded happen in sequential order. We do want to make you aware that this is a big job, so it's a good idea to think about your data verification strategy in advance and try to streamline the process. For example, by using an Excel sheet template. We do recommend you make use of COBO Toolbox in order to check the data throughout the study when it will still be possible to correct it. It's much harder and impossible to correct data months after it's been collected, or even weeks. COBO is also really useful, or a similar digital system, rather than paper-based data entry, because paper-based data entry leaves much more room for errors to creep in. And it's also very time-consuming for the paper data to be copied into a spreadsheet. So that's all about what's happening during the intensive cooking diary studies, such as the baseline. Now back to the phases. After baseline and before the transition cooking diary with the electric cooking appliances, participants must be trained in how to use the e-cooking devices and given time and space to adapt to them and to experiment with them. This should be a practical training. Participants should be able to see common dishes being cooked in the appliances, to taste them, and also to have a go themselves. At the same time, they can be trained in how to measure electricity consumption. Basic electrical safety and safety features of the device should also be carefully explained. We think that this training is usually best to happen over 1 week, and then it's advisable to leave a 2-week gap while cooks try the new appliances out and get used to them. After this, we start phase 2, the transition cooking diary. Phase 2 is the transition cooking diary, which is an intensive type, and the purpose is to collect data on how people cook after the electric cooking appliances are introduced. We usually try to run this for 4 weeks in order to get a good indication of how the electric cooking devices fit into cooking practices. It might be the case that the cooks are not using the electric cooking device every day, but maybe every other day or less frequently, and therefore we set 4 weeks as a long enough duration to catch the patterns of their electric cooking device use. It's exactly the same as the baseline cooking diary, but now the cooks have the option of using the electric cooking appliance, as well as their normal stoves. Cooks record electricity consumption for each dish, as already described, and the enumerators still visit every day to collect the data. This phase is where we find out how the electric cooking devices fit into cultural cooking practices, or how cooks are modifying their usual routines in response to the new devices. Data collection phase 3, monitor. We recommend that after the intensive transition diary of phase 2, a light cooking diary is used to keep track of electric cooking throughout the trial period. This is what phase 3 is, and this can go on for as long as is needed. As defined before, the light cooking diary is much simpler and less effort for cooks and enumerators. The cooks record only when the electric cooking appliance is switched on and off, the reason for cooking, such as breakfast, lunch, or dinner, what menu item was cooked on the appliance, and how many people they were cooking for. The enumerator's role changes only very slightly in that rather than visiting every day, given that cooks are producing less data, they visit less often, perhaps once or twice a week. These visits should be set to a sensible frequency so that enumerators have plenty of time to get around the households when they go. They still upload the data to COBO Toolbox, but they use a different, shorter survey this time. And they continue to support participants and troubleshoot any issues that come up. During this monitoring phase in phase 3, which runs until almost the end of the project, there is the opportunity for an intervention. Halfway through, you can hold workshops or meetings to see how cooks are finding using the electric cooking appliance and find out what challenges they are having. Perhaps there is a training that could be offered to improve the cook's experience with the devices. This also might be informed by data that you've already collected. For example, it might be that data from phase 2, transition, and phase 3, the light cooking diary, shows that participants are only cooking certain menu items in, for example, an EPC. In the middle of phase 3, you might hold a meeting or workshop to work out why this is. Perhaps participants tell you that they don't believe these other dishes are possible to cook in an EPC. Then you might be able to provide a training where you demonstrate that it is possible to cook these dishes. In the subsequent data collection, you can see if this training was successful at overcoming the barriers to cooking these particular menu items in an EPC, in this example. And this gives valuable lessons about what training works and is effective and what isn't. At the end of the trial, we recommend running a final intensive cooking diary called the Endline. This is probably 4 to 5 months after participants first started cooking with the electric devices. Have they stuck to it? Has their use evolved? What steady state routine have they now reached? These are the questions Endline answers. It's important to consider an Endline because transition may not reflect the long-term use of the electric cooking appliances. On the one hand, cooks might be experimenting, having just received the new appliance, using it more than usual and be excited about the possibilities. After some time, this excitement might wear off and they actually use it less. On the other hand, perhaps initially cooks will be hesitant or simply too busy to try to work out this new way of cooking, in which case, by Endline, they might have had more time to work it out and be cooking on it more. The question of long-term, more steady-state cultural cooking practices is a really important one. We aren't interested in effecting a change to modern energy cooking just for a few weeks, but in the long term. In terms of activities, this Endline is essentially a repeat of the transition phase, but at the end of the study. And then that's it for the diaries. To conclude the study, the final step is an exit survey with the participants to get their feedback on what it was like to cook with electricity. The survey probes for participants' opinions on the user experience of cooking with electricity, the design of the appliances, the taste of the food they cooked, and how the experience compared with cooking with their normal fuels. An example paper-based survey can be found in the Eco Shared folder, and we expect to have a COBO version available at some point in the near future. The final aspect I will talk about is an optional activity which can be a lot of fun and provide great data about energy-efficient cooking methods. The e-cooking challenge can be organised with a number of cooks who compete to cook a dish on electric appliances with as little energy as possible. It's best to run this competition with energy-intensive dishes because the effect of energy-saving practices is far more visible. While the cooks are competing, enumerators can observe and take electricity measurements and carefully record what energy-efficient cooking practices the cooks are using to keep energy consumption down. Prizes can be offered to the cook who uses the least energy to make the dish. The benefits of running an e-cooking challenge is to gain greater depth of knowledge and information on how that particular dish is cooked and how to cook it most efficiently. Events such as these can be the start of e-cookbooks. Here are 3 examples on the right that have come out of MECS-related activities thus far, to do with Kenya and Tanzania. They provide recipes and tips for cooking them with the least energy possible, helping to raise awareness and transform the cooking practices of even more people. Thank you for listening to this webinar. That brings us to the end. This slide shows the COBO Toolbox resources available in the Eco Shared folder. The first three are survey templates. You can upload these to the COBO website and deploy them and manage them there. They will need to be adapted to each project context. In particular, the menu items will need to be edited to be appropriate, so they are actually dishes that are cooked in the study contexts. There's also a user guide, and this explains how to use the COBO Toolbox app. And for information on how to use COBO in terms of uploading, deploying and managing forms and accessing the data, have a look at support.cobotoolbox.org, which is a very comprehensive guide on how to use COBO. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Anna, for providing that talk. So yeah, there we have the overview of the Cooking Diaries data collection process and the various phases and types. So now we have some time here to for you to ask any questions or any comments, and so please feel free to add those to the meeting chat box. As you may have noticed, there's already been a few questions concerning the size of LPG cylinders, and people have commented in the poll they're 15 kg or 30 kg, which obviously has implications in terms of the heaviness and weighing them on scales. So I mean that's something that we can look into to try and work around that solution. I mean, clearly it's going to be easier with smaller cylinders, but yeah, we will if that's not possible, please, or that's not something that's available in your country market, yeah, we'll look into that and get back to you as soon as we can. Did anybody have any other questions that they wanted to add? And if they do, please add them to the chat box. And while we're waiting to see if anybody has any questions, I don't know, Anna, whether there was anything you wanted to add to what's already been said about the LPG, or any other comments you had.
Hiya. Yeah, I mean, the LPG is the hardest fuel to measure, and we've definitely had that as a challenge before in diaries that have had participants using it. I have never actually run a diaries with LPG users, so I've kind of managed to get around the problem in that sense. But I know that John Leary, who has run diaries in Kenya, I put in the chat box what his strategy was to purchase these smaller cylinders. Obviously, as Richard says, if that's not possible, then we will try and do something. We will try to think about what other solutions there could be. I've just got another question. So Martin's question is about how much detail can be added into the COBO Toolbox survey by the researcher, such as maybe field notes or any other detailed notes about the participant and their experience. So the survey is, you can edit the COBO surveys that we've offered as templates, and you can put in additional fields to put extra notes in. For example, a field at the end, maybe to say any other kind of things that you want to note down about the interaction that you had today with the cook. So yeah, I mean, the surveys are entirely editable, and you can add whichever input fields that you need for your particular purpose. And another question from Ashma: any tips on incentives you can provide to study participants without influencing their cooking behavior? That is a really good question. Yeah, in terms in the study in Tanzania, we thought about this quite carefully. We decided against any monetary incentives because we were worried that that would change their fuel use. and also potentially the foods that they choose to cook. And we also decided against any food incentives. So we were thinking about kind of maybe bags of rice or something similar, and we decided against that. What we ended up going with were basic staples that we know people will be using, but that won't influence their menu. So, for example, cooking oil, sugar, and we also then went into kind of other household items such as laundry soap or other soap. So anything around this kind of type of item that won't influence the menu or won't influence what fuels they're using.
And I think I remember, Anna, we were discussing the use of monetary incentives, and I think you were saying that if monetary incentives may be okay if it's not going to, if the price of electricity isn't too expensive, and so it wouldn't affect whether they used it or not.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it depends on the price of electricity. It depends on the price of the different fuels and whether or not giving a monetary incentive might actually change which fuels they choose to cook with. So John has just added to the conversation to say that, yeah, as was mentioned, he has used gas flow meters to measure gas consumption on bigger cylinders. The challenge is that they're quite expensive. So yeah, just to say again, the LPG users, they do present a bit of a challenge to the diaries, and it's worth thinking quite carefully about how we can accurately measure that fuel. So John also mentions that bigger cylinders, such as 15 kg ones, can be weighed using the flat scales. It's just a matter of kind of hauling them on and off. But he says that the flat scales, I think he means the flat scales here, that are used in vegetable shops or kind of commercial shops, have a maximum weight range of 40 kilograms. So that would actually be able to do the 30 kilogram cylinder.
Okay, perhaps give it a minute or so more, just in case anybody else has any further questions. And if any questions come to mind a little bit later, please also feel free to email me.
Yeah, John adds, thank you, John, for interjecting with your experience about LPG, that you don't actually need to take the cylinder on and off even, you can just leave it on the scale. So I guess that would be the solution, just make sure we have a flat scale with a large enough weight range for the 30 kilogram cylinder, but as he says, you do need to detach the regulator.
Okay, well, yeah, thanks Anna, and thanks John for responding to those questions. And yeah, as I was saying before, please feel free. I mean, you may well think of questions that come up later, and yeah, just to send me an email, and I can share them amongst the team, and we'll get back to you. Yeah, just to flag up again what I was mentioning at the beginning, we've got 2 further webinars coming up. So next Wednesday, we have the return of the field methods webinars and seminars, which is being led by John Leary, and they next week's one on Wednesday has been designed to complement this eco webinar series, and it's going to be focusing on local adaptations of the Cooking Diary studies, and it will be led by people from 3 different countries. I think it's Kenya, Myanmar, and Nepal, and so we'll be getting the experiences of people on the ground that have used the Cooking Diaries methodology before. And then the Wednesday after that will be another eco webinar, and we'll be looking at data analysis. Okay, just okay, I think we've got some final questions. Okay, I think that's been responded to about the fuel wood. So yeah, just once again to say thank you very much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you all again for next week's Field Methods webinar and for the following week's Eco webinar. Thanks very much, and thanks again to Anna and to John for helping with the questions.